Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Game Over Toronto. Big win for the Leafs. An emphatic win, I think, is the word I would use to describe this one. 6-2 over the LA Kings. A lot of things that we've been waiting for to happen this season finally happened. Two power play goals. Auston Matthews finally gets on the score sheet. William Nylander looking good. Bobby McMann looking good. Lots and lots of positives to take away from, and we'll get into that, as well as some stuff that I think we can probably learn from this game as well. Here tonight on Game Over Toronto. First, though, introductions. My name is Dominic Jones, and with me, we got Zach Payne. Zach, welcome back, buddy.
Thank you. It's a good time to be a Leafs fan, rattle off a couple of wins after a tough start to the year. Also want to apologize to everyone. I know I'm in a bit of a scuff setup today, but I'm on a bit of a trip, so we're making do with what equipment I have available.
Yeah, a big shout out to our other co-host, Lauren Williamson, who was supposed to be on tonight. Unfortunately, under the weather. Zach stepping up big, getting the call up tonight. It was supposed to be off, so we appreciate that. Sending our best to Lauren as well. As always, want to remind you, make sure you're subscribing to Game Over Toronto. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on the podcast feeds, and make sure you subscribe to all the Game Overs that we got going on. There's lots of great content covering all the Canadian teams in the NHL. Zach, let's just dive right into this game and just give me your overall feeling on how this game went down tonight.
Yeah, a bit of a weird one. Bit of a contrast to what we've seen in the previous few wins, which is, to start the year, the Leafs have been very good at dictating play. They've been controlling time of possession. They've been controlling the shot attempt share. This was a game where they were a lot more quality over quantity. And the Kings in the second half of the game, they really took it to the Leafs. Part of that is score effects. It's going to happen in a 5-0 game where the other team's just naturally going to get more chances. But the Leafs also did struggle a little bit to kind of regain possession. It was the first time in so far this season that they've really been put on their heels and haven't really had an answer to, like, in terms of getting out of the zone with clean breakouts and transitioning from defense to offense. It was a lot of quick strikes on offense and then a lot of long periods of time where they were sitting back on their heels. The Kings were controlling play. And it was definitely a little bit more of a little interesting to see that, but I don't think that's going to be the norm. I think the Leafs in general are still going to be a good possession team. But I'm going to chalk it up to partially score effects, but also I think it is worth noting that the Kings just had a pretty good second half of this game.
Yeah, that's why I said this was an emphatic win for the Leafs rather than a dominant win. Like, I feel like you win 6-2, you feel like it should be you dominated the other team. And while they did in a lot of ways, like you said, the Kings outshot them. There were points in this game where the Kings, were outshooting them, 9-0 over the first 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes of the second period. So, I think there's room for improvement, but you don't want to dwell too much on the on the things he did wrong when you won 6-2, because there's a lot of good in here that we'll get to all of it, of course. If you're listening live, feel free to throw some questions in the chat. We'll get to those as we go. Let's start with the two guys who are leading scoring in terms of goals on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Naturally, William Nylander, and of course, Bobby McMann. McMann with the 2 goals tonight. Willie with the power play goal. Let's start with McMann. What did you make of his play in this one?
Yeah, we've come a long way as a fan base, going from this revelation towards the end of last year to this guy who gets scratched in game 1 of the season, and people kind of gaslit themselves into thinking that was a good idea. And we're finally back to where we all thought we were going to end up anyways, which is Bobby McMann, a very effective middle six winger. He had a couple of nice goals in this game. He the first one kind of cleaning up the garbage in front on a rebound, and then a really nice play between him and Nylander on that breakaway on McMahon's second goal. He was also very heavy on the forecheck. He had a really nice hit, I believe, in the second period. And, McMahon, he's not the best player in the world, but he's a Craig Berube player to me. He plays very simple but effective hockey. He crashes in on the forecheck. He goes to the net. He shoots the puck. He has a pretty good shot. Like, I thought he just played exactly the type of game that you want to see from a Leafs player, which is, blue collar, get in on the forecheck, work hard. And he got rewarded with a couple of goals, and it's happened a few times this season that he's just kind of been rewarded with putting the puck on net.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's kind of crazy that he was scratched for the season opener. Like, the fact that he's come out and scored 3 goals in 3 games here, it does make you wonder why he was sitting out, why he was in the press box. But it's been nice to see him back, and those goals, they were good goals. They were good goals. They weren't like garbage goals. They didn't bounce off somebody's leg and in. Like, he was going to the net, going hard, and that line, Willie, McMahon, Domi, strong. I'm liking what I'm seeing from this.
It works. Yeah, it works.
Yeah, before the season, we were talking about putting Domi back with Matthews, but if this keeps working, let's keep it rolling. I have some questions about the third line, as I think Craig Berube does, but we'll get onto that stuff later. The second line and the first line tonight, both looking very strong. Nylander, of course, a huge part of the Bobby McMahon goals, scored his own goal. How do we feel about Willie's performance?
Yeah, it was. It's funny because we didn't know if he was going to play. The Leafs have caught their yearly flu bug early. It seems Tavares missed a game on Saturday, and now Nylander, he missed practice. He wasn't seen at morning skate, but he did end up playing in this game, and he was largely effective. Especially in transition and controlling pace of play. This is what we know that Nylander does well. Skating through the neutral zone. He has the puck on his stick. He is the one that controls what goes on the ice. And I thought Bobby McMahon was doing a phenomenal job of playing off of that. And Nylander, I think he had a rough first 2 games of the season. I thought the last 2, he's looked a lot more like himself. On the power play goal, it's a bit of a nothing play. He's just kind of putting the puck on net. Goalie happens to be screened and it goes in, which you'll take. The Leafs definitely needed a goal like that for the power play to get going. But I thought on the whole, it was just a lot more of what you expect from Nylander, which is, control of play, puck on his stick. He's a very puck dominant player, and he made a phenomenal pass to McMahon. That whole play on Bobby McMahon's second goal, Nylander at the defensive zone blue line just pokes it by the defender, takes off in transition, then stops up, draws the defender in, and then feathers it to an area for McMahon to go get. It was vintage Nylander. It just exceptional play. And, this is who he is. He's an elite player who will play largely good for most of the game, and then he'll make a couple of splash plays to really stand out.
Yeah, exactly. And like a lot of the big guys, he took a little bit of time to get going here. But as they pointed out at the end of the broadcast, all of a sudden, you're looking at the stat lines for Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander. Doesn't look so bad. There's a lot of panic out of 1 or 2 games, and all of a sudden we're looking at it. Things look to be about where you'd like them to be. Maybe you'd like 1 or 2 more goals from Matthews, but we're again 4 games in. There's so much season ahead of us. Plenty of time for him to score 69 more goals and finally crack the 70 plateau. Let's talk a little bit about Matthews. He got his first. You could really tell he wanted that. He wanted that, and it was funny. Both Matthews' goal and the first McMahon goal, that puck was in and out of the net so quickly. I wasn't sure that they scored. I thought for sure with the McMahon one it hadn't gone in. Matthews was a little bit more definitive, but there was something about these quick shots that they were getting off. But that was a classic Auston Matthews goal for his first of the season.
It's funny. I actually viewed it the opposite. I was confident the McMahon one went in because just seeing the goalie out of position, whatever. Matthews, he whiffs on the shot, and I was about to laugh at him for it. And then he gets it back and just fires an absolute piss missile into the net. I had to look at the ref to figure out if that went in. I didn't see the puck go in. And on the replay, it just in and out of the top part of the mesh in the net. It absolutely beautiful shot. And vintage Matthews rip. Good to see him get on the board. Coming into this game, I definitely was like, you know what? Let's just quell some of these problems, early season concerns. Let's get Matthews on the board. Let's get a power play goal. I'm tired of Philip Gustafson having more power play goals than the Leafs. So it's good to get those out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could tell he wanted it. He needed it. And it was good. It was good for him to get his goal. And, the fact that he wasn't scoring, I don't think necessarily meant that he was having a bad start to the season either. That top line has been terrific through the first couple of games. Like they've been driving play. They were causing the Kings to take penalties. All three of them, Matthews, Marner, and Nyes. Like that's the line I think we were hoping for. It's become what we were hoping it would be last year, right? Like last year, everybody came in with high expectations for Matthew Nyes. It was his first or second season, depending on how you want to count it. And now that he's gotten his feet wet, he's gotten used to the way the league works. Matthew Nyes has kind of grown into that role and filling that third spot on the top line in a way that I don't think we've seen since Zach Hyman left. That line has been missing its third since the Leafs were unable to re-sign Hyman, and it was almost like we were just waiting. Like no disrespect to Michael Bunting or Kelly Yarncroc or anybody else who's played up on that top spot, but it almost feels like the team was just sort of waiting for Matthew Nyes to be ready and to slot in there. And so far so good, driving play, lots of chances, and drawing penalties, which is exactly what you want from your top line.
Yeah, and I think the key thing for this top line is you need them to be dominant. If you're going to allocate this many resources to the top line, you need them to be far and away your best line. In the first couple of games, that maybe wasn't necessarily the case, but I mean, they look pretty good now. I am of the minds that I generally don't like loading up the top line like this. We proved last year that Matthews can drive his own line. He can have whoever on his wings and he'll make it work. And Marner, we know if he's in a reduced role, can also drive a line. We saw that when he was playing with Matthew Nyes, John Tavares in the playoffs. I'm fine with it for now. I do want to see other combinations, but it is always reassuring to know that a combination works. And it looks like this trio is one of the Leafs' better options if that's the way they want to go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Someone who made their something else that was like kind of a big story going into this game was the season debut of Timothy Liljegren. He sat out the first 3 games. He was scratched in favor of Connor Timmins. He finally makes it into a game. What's your feeling on Liljegren after his first game?
I honestly didn't notice him that much, which for a defenseman is good. You don't really want to stand out necessarily on the back end. It's the old Mike Babcock theory that if I don't notice you, then that's probably a good thing. He did have one negative play when he took a penalty at one point on a cross check. It is what it is. I think that's it is a cross check. It's something that definitely gets called in the regular season and probably wouldn't playoff game. But aside from that, he looked relatively stable moving the puck. He looked good defending in transition. I think the only times I noticed him in a negative way were deep in the Leafs zone, in the defensive zone, when he was maybe struggling with the forecheck a little bit. It kind of looked a little bit like the Timothy Liljegren that we have kind of come to know, which is he does some things well. He has some warts at defending physicality, but on the whole, I thought he was fine.
Yeah, in terms of, he's starting 3 games after everybody else. He's had a really sort of challenging camp where he went in, I think perhaps expecting to have a spot in the top 6 and then lost it. And, there's a whole bunch of guys in the press box breathing down his neck. Like all the pressure is on him. Given the circumstances, I think he did it about as well as he could have. Like you said, you didn't notice him a lot, which is good. Like we've heard a lot about Chris Tanev this season, and how often do you notice Chris Tanev on the ice? Like barely.
Yeah, it's really, you notice him when he's shutting down a play in transition before it even happens, right?
Yeah.
Like you notice when the puck's on his stick, and that's about it. You don't notice him that much.
Yeah, when for as much talk as there's been about the defense, it's all been about Riley or OEL, Timmins, McCabe, Benoit, and Liljegren, and there's Tanev just been quietly doing his thing. And so Liljegren having a game like that where there's not a ton to pick apart with him. He generally did pretty well. Not to compare him to Kristanov, but like it's a positive sign as a defenseman for a defenseman that we're not too worried about him when he was on the ice. Again, the penalty, you don't love it. You don't love to see that from him. You wish that could have been avoided. He could have made a better decision. But again, with all the stuff happening around him, all the stuff going on, for him at the start of this season, I feel like, a dopey penalty, I'll give him that. I'll give him one. And as long as it doesn't become a trend, right? When it becomes a trend, that's when we can worry about it. Everybody takes a dumb penalty here and there. And that was his for, let's say, the next few games.
Yeah, exactly.
This kind of the other story of the game, of course, being the LA Kings outshooting the Leafs. This has been a tough stretch for the Kings. They just got out of that wacky 8-7 game with the Senators. They're on a 7-game 7-game road trip to start the season, which that just feels unfair. Like I'm not a big Kings fan, but that feels unfair to any team to make them do that. But they came out. They were firing a lot of shots on the net. Anthony Stolarz, it gets his second win, comes up big, shuts the door when we need him to. I almost feel like at this point, this is what we expect from Stolarz, which is kind of crazy. It's his third game of the season, his third game in the blue and white. But if you tell somebody that at the start of the season, the starting goalie is going to be hurt, and you're going to be running with the backup and the third stringer for the first several games, you'd be a little bit worried. And if you heard that your backup started 3 games, won 2 of them, and the only one that he lost was a 1-0 defeat, you feel pretty good about that. And at this point, like, I almost feel like there's nothing left to say about him. He shuts the door when he needs to. And poor Joseph Woll, when he comes back, he's going to have a fight on his hands, I think, for that number 1 spot.
Yeah, I definitely have been laughing a little bit at the TSN and Sportsnet broadcast that I've been like, oh, who's going to start game 1 of the playoffs? Like, guys, relax. We got a long way to go.
It's the second. We're barely in the second week of the season here.
Like, relax. But I think Stolarz has largely been everything you wanted him to be, which was a very solid backup that is going to challenge to be the starter. And since Joseph Woll is obviously not playing because he's been injured, it's been the Stolarz show, and he has largely been very good. And there was a couple times in this game where the Leafs, looked a little shaky in their own end, and Stolarz was there to save the day. He had a couple of nice cross-crease saves, and I've talked about this a few times, but he's such a huge human being that he's never out of any play, right? Yeah. It doesn't matter, like, unless he's like so far out of the net, which he hasn't been, he's going to have a chance to make a save. And that's really all you can ask for. He's been very good positionally. And I think he understands that if he plays his position well, like, and just stays in the crease, plays his angles right, he's so big that he's going to make most saves. Worked out for him.
Yeah, exactly. He's been... Yeah, exactly what you said. I got nothing to add to it. there was a great save on Quinton Byfield late in the game. Yep. And again, it just cements that this is somebody that we can rely on, thus far into the season. Let's move into our second period to look at some of the at the larger trends for this season. Of course, again, remind you to subscribe to Game Over Toronto specifically, but all the Game Overs that we've got going on. Great coverage of the Canadian teams so far this season, and of course you can join in on the conversation on the various social medias. We got lots of links in the description for the video and the podcast. So join in the fun, the Game Over fun. But let's start with the topic of conversation that's dominated a lot of this season for the Leafs, and that is the power play finally coming through. 2 goals. Nylander and Tavares both get them on, I believe, the last 2 power plays of the game. How much relief did you feel when that first Nylander one went in?
Well, first of all, quick shout out to Luke in the chat who made a great point. I'm uncomfortable with how comfortable I feel with our goaltending. That's honestly kind of where we're at. No, it was a big relief for the power play to just get one, right?
Yeah.
And the first power play of the game, Matthews had a pretty decent look that got deflected off a stick, and then he got checked by Gavrikov as he was going for the rebound. That first power play, they at least were moving the puck well. The second one of the day was a complete non-factor. They couldn't even get the zone. They couldn't do anything. And then the power play that Nylander scored on was really what you want to see, which is the Leafs. They stopped messing around with the drop back. They essentially had 4 guys lined up all together, and they just went. They just go. Stop with this reloading nonsense. Let's just get the zone. They go quick. They move quickly. They move with purpose. They get the zone. They get their setup. And Nylander, again, what did after the first game of the season, Craig Berube says, I want more direct action on the power play. Nylander, simple, nothing shot, just throws it on goal because you never know what's going to happen. Screen in front, happens to go in, and it was desperate. It felt like a big exhale from Leafs Nation, right? There was a big collective exhale after that goal because we all could just be like, they got one, right?
Yeah, and look, again, it helps that when you have a goalie who's just come into the game as the goalie there, they chased Dave Riddick from the game about halfway through the second period, leaving Phoenix Copley to come in and try and clean up the mess for LA. But yeah, when that first one went in, there was sort of that, okay, good, we got the monkey off our back. Now the question was, could they keep it rolling forward? Because the thing about the power play, right, is you don't want to dwell on anything too much 4 games into the season. Everybody's still finding their sea legs. They're still getting used to being back, still getting used to new teammates, all that stuff. But this was just such a continuation of one of the most frustrating aspects of the end of last season and specifically the playoffs. And until Oliver Ekman-Larsson got out there last game, it was just the same. It was literally the same people. There wasn't even the excuse of new players getting to know each other and trying to create new chemistry. And like you went through, that first power play felt like it carried some of the momentum of the last game, even though it didn't score. And then the second one, you're just looking at it going like, God, I feel like I'm watching. I feel like it's April again, and the team should be in black and gold instead of silver and black, because it was really bad, and they were just not handling it well. And then finally, like you said, throw it on net, hope for the best. It goes in. All of a sudden, you can start to flip the narrative. But then you do need to actually flip the narrative, which is to score that second one. Because otherwise, then you're looking at it go, okay, they got one, but they still couldn't get any more. Because, there's always that moment when the power play is struggling where they get one and we think, they've solved it. It's saved. It's over. We don't have to worry about this anymore. And then typically for the Leafs, they go right back to struggling. So the Tavares one, even though it was at the end of the game, it was, the 4th insurance marker at that point to really make sure there was no chance for an LA comeback. It was just nice to see that, okay, they're going to continue this. They're hopefully going to keep this rolling, hopefully going to, make this power play into the threat that we know it can be, and that it really should and needs to be for a team that is this top heavy, this loaded up with elite talent in the top 6. We talked a little bit on Saturday, Lauren and I, about at what point do you start considering having 2 separate, 2 more balanced units. This game hopefully can show that this first unit we don't have to quite worry about that just yet. Maybe this first unit can keep things going, can keep things rolling just a little bit more. Yeah. And you want to add on anything there?
The thing is, like, the end of the game one, typically, if this is a normal game where we're not worried about it, it's a bit of a Mickey Mouse goal, right? Like, where we like, oh yeah, they got a stat patter at the end, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit different because I think there's a reason Berube put the top unit out with 2 minutes to go in a 5-2 game, right? Like, they need to build confidence. They need to build some cohesion because they look so out of sync. And I think what you saw on that final power play of the game, the Tavares one, was really, really good. It was a bit of a Mickey Mouse goal, right? Like, where we like, oh yeah, they got a stat patter at the end, whatever. Yeah. But it's a little bit different because I think there's a reason Berube put the top unit out with 2 minutes to go in a 5-2 game, right? Like, they need to build confidence. They need to build some cohesion because they look so out of sync. And I think what you saw on that final power play of the game, the Tavares one, they were flowing a lot more freely. They just looked a lot looser out there. They weren't stuck in their rigid structure. They were just skating and playing, and that's where they're at their best, is when they drop the structure and they just play. The structure, I've maintained this through the years. The Leafs structure on the power play, that's your start, right? Okay, we're going to start with Matthews and Nylander on the flanks, Marner down low, Tavares in the slot, defenseman at the top. Okay, great. Puck is like, as soon as the puck is dropped, you get in that setup, go crazy. That is like, after the faceoff, that's the last time you should see the formation, because you want to be skating around, right? Like, so it was good to see that, and hopefully they continue it.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Craig Berube. We talk a lot about, what does a coach bring? What does he in particular bring? And a lot of times it's stuff that we're trying to read between the lines. We're trying to see it in the plays that the players are making. It's hard. We don't always see specific examples of what the coach does. In this game, we got a pretty specific example. After the second LA goal, Berube took a timeout, and I think for most people, initially when you saw that, you're wondering, is he delaying to find out if we're going to challenge this? Is there, maybe there was some goaltender interference, maybe the play was offside. We're trying to hope for something good to happen, but no. As Josh puts it in the chat, he took a took a timeout just to yell at Pontus Holmberg, and I don't think it was just Pontus Holmberg. I think Holmberg might have been an avatar for some other frustrations. But what did you make of this timeout, this Berube timeout, in a game where his team was winning? I think at that point 5-2.
It's the old Sheldon Keefe special, eh? Now, when Sheldon Keefe used to call these timeouts throughout games when he was the Leafs coach, it would always be because, well, the Leafs had a propensity to blow leads, and so you were always kind of worried about that. It was a voice in the back of your head that's like, "Hey, let's reset, let's settle down." For Berube, I think he was probably just genuinely pissed off at the team's effort to start there in the third period, and thought he just wanted to give them a swift kick in the ass. So I don't think this will be the norm. You're not going to see, like, if the Leafs go up 4-0 in a game, 4-5-1, and the other team gets one, you're not going to see timeouts all the time like you did under Keefe. But I think Berube is going to use those timeouts throughout the season whenever he feels that his team just isn't bringing the effort, right? Which is what most coaches do. But I think for Berube in particular, it's really going to be like, hey, that goal happened because you guys aren't skating hard. So pick it up. Like, it's going to be that kind of idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you look at the replay of that goal, it's incredibly frustrating. There's more Leafs in the slot. There's more Leafs just in the vicinity of the crease. How the hell does nobody clear the puck away? Like, I completely get why he would be frustrated. And, it's early in the season. You don't want these sorts of things to become bad habits. So take the time out. Exactly. Let them know this isn't going to fly with me. And, unfortunately, Pontus Holmberg, I think, got to be the avatar for that. And hope and to be fair to the team, they more or less handled things a little bit better in the defensive zone through the final 15 minutes or so of the game, and shut her down, got another goal, and ended on a high. But that is a moment that in a different world, especially with the Leafs, a goal like that could be backbreaking. A goal like that could make it seem like, all right, we've got big problems here, because we've seen enough teams come back against the Leafs in ridiculous settings, in ridiculous scenarios, that we never feel like we can truly relax until the final horn goes.
Yeah, and that goes both ways, though, to be fair. Like, we've seen the Leafs do the same thing. So that's the exciting thing and terrifying thing about Toronto Maple Leafs hockey, is no game is ever over until the final horn.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Something else that I think maybe Berube and the coaching staff might have something to say about as we roll into the next couple of games. The Leafs are taking a lot of penalties. They're taking a lot of penalties. I know Simon Benoit was kind of the avatar for this for a while. He didn't take one tonight. Good job. Good job, Benoit. That's good. But I looked it up. 4 penalties tonight. 4 on Saturday against Pittsburgh, 5 against New Jersey, and 5 against Montreal. Obviously, the refs call more penalties at the start of the season. That's something I think we're all kind of used to as NHL fans. But is this something that you think we should be not necessarily worried about, but keeping a close eye on as we roll into this weekend?
Yeah, I think if the NHL were a rational sport, maybe. But here's the thing: is in the NHL over the past few years, is some very smart people on Twitter have begun to notice that hey, the teams who get penalized the most also seem to get the most power plays. What a weird
Mm.
coincidence! And for a Leafs team that has had so many power play struggles, and last year didn't have the best penalty kill either, it means you're going to get a ton of both. And
Mhm.
you have, again, it's a long season. We're say it a million times throughout the course of these stream broadcasts. The Leafs need to, honestly, I'm fine with taking more penalties. The Leafs are establishing physicality, and some of these penalties are going to go away as the season progresses. And all it means is that other teams are going to be called more. If the difference is instead of having 2 power play opportunities a game, you get 5, and you have to kill 5 penalties. Okay, great. That means you're better set up for success when the playoffs come. And special teams, the margin for error is so much smaller, and you need your special teams to be better because you've had a lot more reps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. It is a good point, and the penalty kill has been pretty strong off the start to start things off. Like, hasn't been perfect, obviously. There's some stuff you'd like to see them improve on, but even just as Lorna and I talked about on Saturday, there's putting Matthews and Marner out there that has had a pretty good effect. Those guys have been good. Marner had a great shorthanded chance in this one, one where you really would have liked to have seen that one go in and really shake things up and give the team a kick in the rear end. But still, yeah, solid stuff from the penalty kill. Nothing too much to worry about there. I would like to see that number dip just a little bit, even if it does equate to more power plays. I do worry that at some point you take one too many, and all of a sudden you're going to wind up losing a game because of that. And especially once we get into facing some teams that maybe have higher expectations than the LA Kings, the Montreal Canadiens, the Pittsburgh Penguins, all kind of bubble at best playoff teams. Maybe one too many power plays given up might be what gets them into some trouble and maybe costs you a game here and there.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. It's going to be something that again, we haven't really seen the Leafs take on a top team. And Josh points out in the chat that Saturday might be considered their first real test going up against the Rangers, who have been a very good team over the last few years. So it's going to be interesting to monitor in that game for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's move into our third period here and take kind of a bird's eye view of the season so far. I know it's only 4 games, but let's look at what we think has. Here's what we're gonna do. I don't know how to set this up other than to just say what it is. We're gonna talk about maybe some unsung heroes of the Leafs season so far. Again, with the ultimate caveat, it's only 4 games, but players who maybe haven't had the spotlight shone on them the way to the same extent that, say, Bobby McMahon, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, the top guys, Matthew Nyes, any of those guys have. Those guys everybody's has shared the love for them. Who's somebody that you think has been quietly just doing a good job, being a good, solid player for the Leafs?
You know what? I'm about to go against a lot of things. I've been very vocal in my beliefs against this player.
Ooh.
But Max Domi has had a very good start to the year.
Yeah.
I am on the record being a noted Max Domi. I don't want to say hater, but I'm not exactly his biggest fan. I was very adamant that I had hoped the Leafs would bring back Tyler Bertuzzi instead of Max Domi. Mm-hmm. Alas, Domi is the one who is here, but he's quietly been very good. He's hasn't had quite as many moments defensively, and in this game he steps up as the second line center, which allows John Tavares to slide back to the third line, which honestly might be the optimal way for them to line up right now. I mean, I don't love Domi as a center in general, but we saw in the playoffs he could fill there in a pinch and at times look very good. I thought he's been pretty good offensively. He hasn't had any wow moments, but it's both sides, right? I would rather take this more stable version of Domi than whatever the Jekyll and Hyde ride was last year.
Yeah.
What about you?
Let me just say about Max Domi. I had a lot of hope for him coming into this season because, sort of his first year in Toronto, that's gonna be tough for anybody, right? Like this is the ultimate hockey market, in terms of pressure, in terms of media attention, all that stuff. Like that's why Sheldon Keefe had that quote where people said he was going to go coach in the real NHL now that he's in New Jersey. And for Max Domi, I feel like that's even more so the case because of who his dad was, right? Because everybody loved Ty Domi. People have such fond memories of him. He was such a big part of the Leafs community. To then come in and be part of that, I think there were a lot of expectations on Max. A lot of people hoping for him to not necessarily be his dad, but to recapture the feelings that his dad brought people, which is, a lot of fire, a lot of excitement, a lot of energy. And, Max played into that himself with a lot of his social media presence last season. But I think that pressure may have led to him getting off to such a slow start last year. And then once he was able to get over that a little bit, I think we started to see the version of Max Domi that we were hoping for. And I think that's the version that has shown up to start this season. But I want to single out Jake McCabe. Because, again, we've talked a lot about the defense. So there's been a lot of focus on the new guys, a fair bit of focus on Morgan Rielly, a fair bit of focus on who is not in the lineup. And Jake McCabe has just kind of quietly been there doing a good job. And I thought he had a really, really good game tonight. Not the least of which things that he did was hit a guy so hard it opened the door. It opened the door to the to the tunnel, to the practice tunnel. I don't think I've ever seen that before. That was incredible. I loved that moment. But he was in on goals. He was making smart passes. I feel like Riley's goal it was due in large part to McCabe, making smart plays, being good with the puck, and as much as people have worried about, is Morgan Rielly's place on the power play? Is Chris Tanev going to be too old? Which version of Oliver Ekman-Larsson's going to show up? Simon Benoit's taking too many penalties. Who's better, Timothy Liljegren or Connor Timmins? Or are we going to start looking at Philippe Meyer? And where does Yanni Hakanpää go when if and when he ever shows up? And there's just Jake McCabe, just holding down things solidly, laying some big hits, making some smart passes, making good plays in the defensive and offensive zones. He's just been reliable, which is, I think, what you want from like a 3-4 defenseman like him. So I've just been really impressed with Jake through the start of this season.
Yeah, and I think what you've seen from McCabe is he's been such a stabilizing influence, and that has allowed OEL to have such an easy transition playing in a role that some have speculated, myself included, that it might be too much for him coming from a sheltered role in Florida. And Ekman-Larsson looks great in large part because he's not the driver of that pair. It's McCabe, who's been so solid defensively. He's literally breaking the arena with his hits, which, again, I also have not seen anyone open the door with a hit. So that was
amazing.
Definitely funny.
I was waiting for a whistle. Like, I felt like that's the sort of thing where you have to blow the whistle. The door opened. And I guess credit to the Scotiabank Arena staff that were able to get in there and slam it shut so quickly that you almost wonder if the ref noticed or if the ref just didn't have time to process it. Because that, again, feels like something you should blow dead, and maybe go have a look at that door and make sure it's not, going to dangerously open a few more times. Because, a hit like that, it's funny because nobody got hurt.
Yeah, everyone. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it could have been a real dangerous play if things had gone slightly differently, and not advocating people opening the doors on hits or anything. And that's not something we want, but it's it was funny because nobody got hurt, I guess is what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and for everyone watching, I encourage you to go find, I don't know if it's out there, but the angle on the replay where you can just see the two ushers by the door, like, have that moment of processing where they're like, oh, no, the door is open. We have to go, like, because that's not, why would you be thinking about that, right? No. Like, it's such a random thing to happen. So that was definitely a highlight from this one. But yeah, McCabe has been very solid. He's, little skeptical offensively, but
Mhm.
you know, he's a more physical defensive player, which is what you expect. He has a good shot, but I don't ever really want to see him skating around or trying to hold the blue line. Um, but he did a good job in this game, and he's been very effective this season. Talked about it a little bit with like Lilligren and Tanev, the whole you don't want to notice them very much.
Mhm.
You haven't really noticed McCabe either, right? He's been very stable, and he's again this exact type of player that Berube likes. I know the Leafs are working on an extension with him that I mean we'll maybe eventually hear about. But yeah, like between the top pair, which again, like they'll try different combos throughout the season. That's fine.
Mhm.
I would love to see what a McCabe Tanev pairing would do because that might be the most beautiful defensive pairing we have seen, well, in my lifetime.
Mhm.
So I think that'd be a fun one to make. But yeah, very solid player.
Yeah, strong stuff. And a lot of good stuff from a lot of players to start off this year. We've been pretty lucky. There hasn't been anyone that has really disappointed, I would say, to start the year. There's people you definitely want more from. I think that's why, again, Pontus Holmberg perhaps became the victim of Craig Berube's barrage during the timeout there. And you know, we'll keep waiting. And I think now that the power play goal watch and the Auston goal watch is over, I think now all eyes are on Nick Robertson for when he's going to break out. That Tavares Robertson Holmberg line, kind of invisible tonight, kind of invisible, and when they were visible,
Not
it
a good game.
wasn't for good reasons. Again, the top two lines were so strong that you didn't notice it as much, and the fourth line was able to pick up the slack a little bit. But you really need Tavares and Robertson going at some point this season.
Robertson in this game was down at % expected goals at
Oof.
5-on-5.
Oof.
Yeah, not good.
Not great. Let's move into our overtime period. So if you're listening live and you have any questions, anything you'd like us to bring up, anything you think we haven't touched on yet, fire away in the chat. I do like this one that Adam Firebear posted a little while ago. Do you think there were more F-bombs or hockey talk from Berube during the timeout? F-bombs.
definitely F-bombs.
Definitely F-bombs.
That was a fiery timeout for sure.
Yeah, I like timeouts in hockey are weird, right? You get one of them, and it's just 30 seconds. Like, I don't know how you're really supposed to have any real hockey talk in there. I guess it's enough time to draw up a play because you see them do that all the time. But in terms of the more like sort of Sheldon Keefe timeout where he's trying to correct something or you know, get people to play to focus on something else, to play better, you know, like whatever it is that he's looking for, that's not enough time. 30 seconds is not enough time to have a really deep, serious hockey conversation. It is enough time to yell at some people and say, give your head a shake, get going, and kick them in the ass a little bit. And I think that's what Berube was doing, and it seems to have worked for this game at the very least.
Yeah, it's a contrast to what you see like in football, for example, where you have the timeouts to stop the clock, or if you need to get a you need to drop a play. It makes a lot more sense in some other sports. Whereas in hockey, it really is the only real effective use for it that we've seen over the years is at the end of the game, if you're pushing to tie the game and you've had your top line out there for a minute or two, and you need to give them just a little bit of a break so that they can stay out. But it's definitely something that I don't really know how you would change that, because hockey just isn't really a game where time is kind of like super interestingly. But I don't know, just something to monitor. We got a question here from Luke. Are you feeling more confident in the defense overall this season? I know for me, that's a resounding yes. So far. I think it's more so, it's not even just about the personnel, because obviously the 6 defensemen that are out there, yes, I feel more confident in these 6 guys versus the 6 that we ended last season with. But it's more so just the style that the Leafs are playing. They're doing a lot better job of having the come back, and also a lot better job of just killing plays before they happen, right? That's the whole thing that with Chris Tanev, that's what makes him so great defensively. We've had guys over the years where they don't play offense because they can't play offense. So they're stay-at-home defensemen, because they literally can't do anything else. Whereas Chris Tanev is a stay-at-home defenseman because he's an elite defenseman, and he does a fantastic job of killing plays before they happen. He is great in neutral zone, defending in transition. He's great at controlled breakouts, which is an area where the Leafs have mightily struggled over the years, is exiting the zone with possession. So I think on the whole, it's both the group is better and the forwards are doing a better job at playing a defense. Well, what do you think?
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. The defense last year, I think, at times felt like it was almost a liability. And that allowed for someone like Simon Benoit to rise and to sort of take his place. And like that's a positive to take from that. But, to go from TJ Brody at his worst, and Mark Giordano at basically the end of his career, to Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Chris Tanev, like you feel a lot better with those guys on the ice. Benoit has continued to come into his own, even with all the penalties. McCabe, as we said, has been solid, just reliable back there. Riley has been Riley, exactly what you expect from him. And then we've had some fun figuring out who the sixth one is, but not in a way where you ever feel like, Liljegren and Timmins, like they're not necessarily maybe your first pick for your top six, but you don't feel like you're really reaching yet. You're not feeling like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel of the Marlies. And there have been some points in previous years when you've gotten really worried about the defense back there. And this year so far, feeling good. And again, there is that looming mountain of a man in Yanni Hakanpää out there, potentially coming to join us at some point in here.
I mean, it's what's the date? October 15th, day whatever of wondering if Yanni Hakanpää is real or just a concept. It's we're gonna keep this. Yanni Hakanpää watch is going to happen all season. If he exists, we need to see him. Otherwise this is the dumbest contract I've ever seen the Leafs sign, because it'd just be wild. Josh hitting us with another question. If Toronto were to make a trade to bring in a player from the outside, what position do you think would be in need? He has 2C listed. I'll say along the same lines, just center in general. I'm okay with John Tavares being the second line center, but the Leafs are in a bit of a unique, not unique position, but a position they were in 2 years ago where the team is largely pretty good. And as it stands right now, the defense looks pretty good. Goaltending looks pretty good. TBD on Joseph Woll, but why not go out and make a splash for a center? Let's see if the Islanders are a tank and you can pry like a Brock Nelson from them or something like that, or a Yanni Gourde. Let's get a legitimately great third line center, or a second line center, so you can push Tavares to be a great third line center, so that you can have a true triple head monster into the playoffs, as they did in that year that they finally won a playoff series.
Yeah, I'd like to see them shore up that third line in some way.
Yeah.
The top line seems to be pretty well set. You got no complaints from me on them. The Nylander, McMahon plus whoever, second line, whether it's Domi, whether it's Tavares, I'm pretty happy with that. No, don't have a lot of complaints. But as we saw tonight, and as we've seen in the first couple of games, still trying to figure out what that third line is going to be, with the rotating cast of Pontus Holmberg, Max Pacioretty, Nick Robertson, of course, and just trying to see who is it going to be, who's going to sort of emerge. Perhaps the answer might be elsewhere in the league. Perhaps it's time to, again, it's so early. Maybe you're not necessarily pushing to make a trade just yet, but maybe the answer might lie externally. But I don't blame them for wanting to try every possible iteration of it internally to see if there's something that can work without having to disrupt the other aspects of the game, the more intangible aspects of the game.
Yeah, you have until the trade deadline to mess around, experiment, and figure out what you have, and then the trade deadline, you can make a move. The regular season for the Leafs is a large experiment just to find out what this works. So
yeah,
we'll keep experimenting and see what happens. Conrad, shout out from Game Over Calgary over there, and Game On Calgary, I believe. When are the Leafs trading for Dan Vladar? You can forget about any trade between the Leafs and Flames because your owner is too petty to trade with us. So,
I've always had a soft spot for Dan Vladar just because his name is as close as you're gonna get to Darth Vader. And so, as a Star Wars nerd, I can't help but just have a little smirk whenever I see that name. But no, not happening. Not
the last time the Leafs traded for a Flames goalie, it went very poor. So never again, please.
The guy who started for the other team tonight and got pulled. So
I never forget that game. I believe it was against the Canucks in that COVID bubble year, where Riddick, literally the Canucks announcers were laughing at him with how bad he was in that game. That was a bad one. But no, yeah, the Flames will never trade with the Leafs because if they would, then Tanev would have been a Leaf in November last year, along with Nikita Zaitsev. So
yeah. There's the politics of the NHL. What fun. But I think
not
that's
a serious team.
But I think that's about where we're going to leave things for today. We'll of course be back on Saturday to break down the Leafs versus Rangers game. As we said, probably the first real test for the Maple Leafs this season. Rangers, always one of the top teams in the East, and another team that's looking to, perhaps slay some demons in the playoffs this year. So a good showdown, good test marker for each team. Should be a lot of fun on Hockey Night in Canada. Zach, thank you so much as always for being on, for jumping in less than for jumping in at the last minute here. Really appreciate that. People want to keep up with you between games. What's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, sorry again, everyone, for the poor video and audio quality this one, as I am on the road. I'll be back to my setup the next time you see me. You can find me on Twitter at ZachPayne41, on YouTube at ZachPayne41, and on Instagram, a little bit weird one, it's _Zach.Payne. So thank you all for checking out the stream. Make sure you check over the Game Over Network, subscribe to Game Over Toronto, all of our Canadian markets, everyone there does a fantastic job. I hope you check us out, and if you enjoyed us, make sure you drop a like on this video as well.
Absolutely. And you can also listen to the audio versions of this. If you can't tune in live immediately after the game for the video version, you can listen to that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me at DominicJ25 on the various social media apps. Instagram is my preferred one, but I'll pop in on the other ones as well. And if you're looking to listen to some people talk about Star Wars, you can check out the Star Wars Underworld. That's my other podcast. We'll be live tomorrow night at 9 p.m. on YouTube. So join us then, and also subscribe to that on your podcast feeds. But that is it. We will see everybody Saturday for Leafs Rangers. Until then, we'll see you next time.